BlackRock is selling Bitcoin again. We have Meta, which is now officially rejecting Bitcoin as a reserve asset for their company. JP Morgan, one of the most important banks worldwide, is issuing a massive warning and says the US should not buy Bitcoin. We have new companies buying Bitcoin. Every day we see new players buying Bitcoin. The Bitcoin price is actually doing pretty well today, slightly in the green, but we still have a lot of uncertainty, especially with weekends here in the market. And right now, there's a rumor going around that we've hit a double top and are actually heading into a bear market. There are several charts being shared about this now. We're going to take a close look at whether that could really be the case. This chart is being shared everywhere and is supposed to signal to you that, just like in the last run, we've now reached the top. But before we get started, leave a like down below so that Bitcoin can keep performing and we don't end up in a bear market. Anyone who doesn't like this now will be responsible if Bitcoin goes into a potential bear market. But that's not going to happen. Even if you don't like it, you don't have to like it. You can do whatever you want, but of course, you help make sure this content keeps getting shared. So even more people become aware of the greatest monetary revolution of all time that's happening right now. And a lot of people are currently sleeping on this. For example, the Bitcoin therapist says, I'm expecting a massive Bitcoin move this year. $150,000 doesn't seem to be enough. $180,000 isn't enough either. What happens to MicroStrategy if Bitcoin rises this aggressively? I think it's going to be painful for the bears. I'm still long and accumulating Bitcoin here. So I think that's the right mindset to have here, and not to whine, oh, Bitcoin had another small correction. I've said this many times before, corrections like these could actually be healthy in the long run, especially if it means we can climb much higher on a much stronger foundation. We're also seeing, for example, Fidelity saying that Bitcoin's fundamentals are stronger than expected. So even they were surprised by how strong the fundamentals actually are. And that doesn't just mean the price foundation, that we're already above 100,000, that retail investors aren't even here yet, and that there's no hype or excess. We're not seeing any FOMO. There aren't any news stories going completely wild. We have new groups of buyers, and we're still seeing new companies adopting Bitcoin. We have countries adopting Bitcoin, and so on. We keep seeing new players coming in, and they're not here just to make some quick trades or anything like that. They're really thinking in terms of a 10-year horizon, sometimes even 15 or 20 years. Michael Saylor, for example, has a horizon that's basically forever, and he's one of the biggest Bitcoin buyers out there. And that just shows that, fundamentally, we're in a better position than ever before. Here we also have the next buyers, for example, the Norwegian digital asset firm K33, which may have only bought around 5.6 million here, but of course, it all adds up. When more and more companies are buying a million here, a few million there, maybe 5 million somewhere else, and so on, it really starts to add up. And underlying all of this, as Fidelity says, there are still the classic fundamentals that don't change. A new block comes every 10 minutes, Bitcoin is still decentralized, and it still hasn't really been hacked. Right at the very beginning, there was a brief issue, maybe in 2011 or 2012 or so, but it was fixed very quickly. But what we have here is a very smooth operation, that Bitcoin is still limited to 21 million, and that Bitcoin is still the best performing asset of the last 10 years, the last 15 years, and much more. Of course, now we also have things like, for example, BlackRock selling Bitcoin, and that always sends a bit of a shockwave when BlackRock sells Bitcoin. I've reported on this from time to time in the past as well. They've now bought 4,113 Bitcoin here, or to be precise, it should be said that the clients sold them. By now, BlackRock has also bought some Bitcoin into its own strategic funds. They now hold it themselves too, but when you hear that BlackRock sold the 4,113 Bitcoin, it always refers to the clients. That means BlackRock is managing the funds for their clients here and isn't selling their own Bitcoin. They continue to hold on to their own Bitcoin. You can always see this in the F13 filings, when new holdings are reported every quarter and you can see how they increase, but it's the clients who are selling here. We've had a very long streak of positive results now. Now, this positive streak has been broken for the time being, and we're seeing people on the selling side of the ETFs again, but in my opinion, this is just a snapshot. This will change again relatively quickly, and I expect that we'll soon see high inflows into Bitcoin again. You can also see here that in the last quarter, more Bitcoins were bought by companies than ever before. Here, nearly 95,000 Bitcoins were bought in the last quarter, or here in Q1. And that simply shows that the interest is there, especially among larger institutional players. Maybe not necessarily among retail investors right now, but this bull market has so far always been driven by. So far, just hear from institutions by the institutional investors. And yes, retail investors will probably join in at some point too, but maybe only once the price is high enough. And then I just hope that retail doesn't end up being the exit liquidity for the institutional investors and so on again. But to be honest, it will probably play out exactly like that. We also have stories here from Metaplanet who are actually posting now that the company is rejecting Bitcoin because there was a shareholder proposal. So from the stock investors, there was a suggestion to introduce Bitcoin as a reserve asset. And basically, this just means that we have 70 billion in cash reserves that are melting away, being eroded by inflation. And the whole thing is also really strange because Mark Zuckerberg actually has a goat named Bitcoin. And there have always been speculations. It can't be that he has a goat named Bitcoin, and yet he's not betting on Bitcoin. You have to understand, though, that such large corporations are very, very complex structures. Sometimes it's really, really difficult to get any proposals approved or to introduce any innovations. That's why I can easily imagine that he might personally hold Bitcoin, but is just a bit more reserved about it at the company level, even though that's actually kind of nonsense. I mean, he loses so much money here every year. I mean, when people say he has cash here, it doesn't really mean he has physical cash stashed under his pillow, but rather that he has treasury bills, government bonds, US government bonds, probably mostly short-term ones, and with those he gets maybe 2, 3, 4% or so, but that just isn't enough to outperform asset price inflation. And that's exactly the problem that Michael Saylor recognized here. Michael Saylor realized this and then said, hey, he needs a solution for his problem. And the solution was clearly Bitcoin, because Bitcoin put him in a completely different position, but a lot of people still haven't realized that. For example, Adam Becker, who said that the Magnificent Seven, which includes Meta, will in the future be replaced by the Bitcoin Magnificent Seven, and then only companies with a Bitcoin strategy will be at the top of the S&P 500. For Mark Zuckerberg, that would mean that sooner or later he will have to adopt Bitcoin here. If he doesn't do it, then he simply won't be among the top 7 companies in the S&P 500 anymore. Feel free to write in the comments below how you see it. We also have more bears at the moment. I mean, Jamie Dimon has also been in the bear camp for a very long time now. He says he hates Bitcoin. He doesn't like it, but just like he doesn't like smoking or drugs, he still allows people to smoke, drink, get high, and do whatever else they want. And yes, on the one hand, that's a liberal attitude, but on the other hand, it's weak not to open up to Bitcoin, but instead to close yourself off from it. And in the long run, that's going to lead to massive losses. And now he's really taking it to the next level and actually says, attention, hold on tight. We should stockpile guns, bullets, tanks, planes, drones, rare earth materials, but definitely not Bitcoin. Shouldn't be stockpiling Bitcoin. So he's saying here that the US should have everything. They should have weapons for their defense, they should have pistols for close-range protection, they should have bullets and ammunition, as well as magazines to reload their firearms, they should have tanks for ground combat, they should have planes for air support, they should have drones for surveillance and reconnaissance, they should have rare earth materials for advanced technology, but they shouldn't have any Bitcoin or digital currencies at all. And you can already see where this is heading. That means a Bitcoiner would never say, okay, go get all the tanks, get all the weapons, and so on. Because many Bitcoiners also know, Bitcoin makes war unaffordable. I mean, the war machine only keeps running because of fiat money. And what happens if the US holds large shares of the war machine and so on? Then, of course, the entire fiat money cartel profits as well. They obviously make money from wars, while so many other people have to risk their lives. And that's basically the nasty thing about our system, that we actually have fiat money, and fiat money is nothing other than blood money. Fiat money is war money. That means every time you use the dollar, every time you use the euro, you're basically supporting chaotic figures like Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan, one of the most influential banks in the world, who actually say, yes, we need to focus more on war machinery, on combat, on violence, on things like that, instead of peace technology, because Bitcoin is clearly a peace technology. I mean, how is that supposed to work if we have Bitcoin, if Bitcoin prevails? How is it supposed to work that we can keep creating endless things, just like Juliana Sorcher always says, that even the USA sometimes has no real interest in ending wars, but instead wants to start wars and drag them out for as long as possible. But it's not supposed to escalate either. It's just supposed to drag on quietly in the background. Then you can just launder money through the war industry. Then you can create so-called new productivity by ramping up arms production, by fueling the war machine, and so on. Then, just like Jamie Dimon says, you can start stacking tanks, start stacking guns, start stacking ammunition. You just end up with a stockpile of things that aren't really beneficial for humanity, but are actually more harmful. And on the other hand, they completely dismiss Bitcoin, just saying, no, that simply doesn't work. And that's why so many people just don't get it. That's also why Jamie Dimon has such a grudge against Bitcoin, because it would destroy everything he believes in: the war machine, the fiat money system, the redistribution effect, the Cantillon effect, where only a very few people benefit. In that system, a huge number of people are losers, but with Bitcoin, everyone benefits. With Bitcoin, for example, if you buy Bitcoin, then Michael Saylor also benefits. And if Michael Saylor buys Bitcoin and you're holding Bitcoin, then you benefit as well. But when central banks print money, only the ones who get the money first benefit, like certain war actors or people with special packages and special debts, where the money is then sent to some war zones. And people who are frugal, who don't have any assets to leverage, who don't get any freshly printed or newly created money, they end up being the big losers here. Oh, right, and I almost forgot to mention the story about the double top, where a lot of people are now claiming, okay, you can see it here in the chart, for example, back in the last bull run, at the last peak, I think it was around 73,000 or something like that. I'm not even sure anymore. Go ahead and write in the comments below where the last all-time high was in the previous cycle. In any case, we see a top here, then a slight sell-off, and then another top that's a bit higher, and then the bull market. If we look at how things are currently shaping up in this cycle, it actually looks pretty similar. We had the top, I think it was almost at 103, 106, 107,000 or something like that. Then a sell-off, dropped back down below 100,000, and now we went up to 111, 112,000, and now we've slipped back down a bit. So it could be that we've just seen a double top here. At least that's what a lot of people are claiming, but we have to clearly distinguish that there's a difference here. Back then, there was definitely more hype, there were more retail investors involved. We also have to be clear that in 2021, there was Luna Ponzi schemes, there was FTX selling paper Bitcoin, and there was the GBTC premium unwinding back then. We had the fastest rate hikes ever, and right now it doesn't look like there will be more rate hikes. In fact, interest rates might even go down. We have ETFs that are buying nonstop now. We have Blackrock, major institutions, we have international legitimization of Bitcoin, and treasury companies pouring billions into Bitcoin. We have states, nation states, that are on the verge of getting into Bitcoin, or are already stacking Bitcoin behind the scenes, or even officially stacking Bitcoin. The US could still buy massive amounts of Bitcoin this year. So we have a completely different underlying sentiment, and I could be wrong. Could also be that we're already in a bear market, but I would probably be seriously mistaken about that. I definitely don't see us in a bear market right now, and I definitely still see new all-time highs coming this year. Go ahead and write in the comments below how you see it. And if you still want to buy Bitcoin, if you're bullish here, I'll put a link below for 21 Bitcoin. There, you can buy Bitcoin easily, securely, and simply. With the code BITCOINODL, you can get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. Guys, see you. See you then.